Well, let's go in on the top 10 hottest comics of the week, brought to you by, well, not brought to you, based off of Cover Price's data. That's right, real data, based off of Cover Price's top 10 list. They released a list on Monday. Our live show was on Friday. We like to go over the list quickly, but Chris gets into the three most interesting books from that list. We are not sponsored by Cover Price, but we use their top 10 list almost like a stock index. Again, I use it as a tool almost every day. I enjoy it, and again, we're not sponsored by them. All right, here we go, Chris. Let's just get into the top 10 hottest comics of the week. That's right, it's an interesting week this week because at number 10, we have Matrix comic book preview. At number 9, we have Spider-Man #1, the first team up of Peter Parker, Prime, and Miles Morales. At number 8 is Thor 134, the first appearance of the High Evolutionary. Number 7, we have Amazing Spider-Man 361. Y'all know what that should be. Number 6, we have Sandman number 25. At number 5, we have Pirate Queen #1. I think this is 2 or 3 weeks in a row it's been on here. Number 4, we have Star Slayer #2. At number 3, Nocterra #1. At number 2, we have Marvel, Special Marvel Edition #15. And at number 1, we have Amazing Spider-Man 546, the first full appearance of Mr. Negative. Quentin, what sticks out for you on this list? What do you dig?
You know what? Truthfully, the Thor really sticks out. I think with everything coming up in the MCU, it definitely has a lot in it and has a lot of connection to what's kind of coming up, in my opinion. But there he's back.
Thanks, Chris.
I was here the whole time. What are you guys talking about?
Moving on, though, Chris, what is your first book you're picking from this list that you find most interesting?
Woo! All right.
Ah, I just gave it away! What was I giving away?
How dare you?
I'm messing up.
Spider-Man #1. Who had this? Somebody had this on their fresh hit.
Give me a sec. Anyways, keep talking. I'll find it.
It's all good. Yeah, Spider-Man #1. Here's the thing. I made a video back in July about sleeper Marvel issue #1 issues. To look out for, to pick up, whatever. And back then, high grades were going for maybe $10. I actually got mine off of an online sale. It was like 50% off. I think this was 2020. I think I paid like maybe $2 for mine. But this book has really boomed. Let's look at what it's done this week, and then we'll talk about why. 107% increase in sales with a high CGC 9.8 for $230. Solid, man. A high raw sold for $69, folks. Man, so again, going back when I made that video just a few months ago, $10 jumped up to $69. Big increase. There is a second print variant of this book where they are both in their masks. So be on the lookout for that one. I do believe that has a much smaller print run. We had a high raw of that sold this last week at $150. So these books are moving. What's really interesting about this book right now is not only do you have the speculation and possibility of Tom Holland MCU Spider-Man meeting up with a young Miles Morales and so forth, but you also have the upcoming Sony video game, which is the continuation of the Spider-Man franchise from the Sony Spider-Man video game that came out a few years back. Remember, then we got the Miles video game, and now the next Spider-Man game, we are actually going to see Peter Parker and Miles together. So it's really interesting, folks, because it's not always the case where you get video games that really pull people into comics. But what Sony has done with this Spider-Man franchise, it's really brought people in. I mean, remember, they did the whole PS4 Velocity and those comic books, those like miniseries, those limited series that were based off of the original video game. When that come out? 2018, if I'm not mistaken. So there's that, right? There's the MCU and the video game hype. So right now there's a little bit of both of that because we got the video game coming out, I believe, next year. I know my son knows because he's always talking to me about it. And then we have the No Way Home Spider-Man movie dealing with the Spider-Verse. So a lot of people are saying, oh, Miles is going to show up. Look, you already had Tom Holland's Spider-Man hanging out with Aaron, Miles' uncle, Donald Glover. I really hope to see Donald Glover come back as the Prowler. We know that Marvel Studios and Kevin Feige sets up Easter eggs. I don't see a Miles Morales showing up in the Spider-Verse. There's already so much going on. We might see maybe Easter eggs or something like that, but I think it's too early. We do know that that Tom Holland signed another contract for another 3 films, and all we know about them so far from the Marvel execs is that it is going to take a more mature, darker tone. We're probably going to follow Peter through college, right? We might get some street level characters, Kingpin. I don't know. But if it's my guess, we're going to get a Miles Morales. And I said this, Jeff, I think we disagreed on our time frame a little bit when we talked about this last year. It's already been about a year, right? And we are getting a Spider-Man film every other year. So it's 2021.
Amazing.
That's 2023, 25, and 27. So we got 6 years until we get to the end of that new contract for Tom Holland. I have a feeling that we could see Miles Morales enter in between there somewhere, in between this next 3-film trilogy, because I do believe it is imperative that we do get a Tom Holland, Peter Parker with a Miles Morales. So interesting to say, but hey, don't let my predictions are somewhat accurate and we're not going to see a Miles right now. Then don't be mad and say, I don't want to buy the book. Go look for books right now because it might be something later on. Now, specifically this book, I'm not telling you to go buy specifically this book, especially in a 9.8, but I guarantee you there's some out there that you can find for a decent value. And maybe, again, this is just my hunch. I always talk about patience. Maybe if you wait for the video game hype to die down and we don't get Miles Morales in No Way Home, maybe the book can cool back off a little bit, But hey, to each their own. I don't tell you to buy anything. I just drop facts and throw my opinions out there.
Yeah, real quick, Son of Comics,
there it is.
And he has a second print right there that you're talking about as well. Son of Comics always sending in some great content to us, and he has both those books. I think that I think there's a possibility. I'm not going to go all in on Miles in terms of No Way Home, but I think there's a strong possibility we may see a tease, not a reveal, a tease of Miles. Yeah. I think there's so much more to explore with Peter, right? I think there's so much, and I don't know if, again, Tom Holland says he would do the character for life, but right. I don't. I think there's so much to explore with this character. I think his college years come up next, and then maybe his professional years, and maybe they could coexist in that universe, right? And I think that's what's going to happen. And actually, maybe I hope. So maybe my hope is kind of leading into my opinion. Quentin, what do you think?
I think there's definitely an opportunity to probably drop some Easter eggs. But I agree with you guys. I think there's a lot of story to tell. But with everything else that's kind of going on, there's a lot of changing of mantles. It's a little too soon for Spider-Man, but you know what I mean? Like, just with everything else that's going on, it would make sense that they would do it. But yeah, it seems like it's too soon, but you might be seeing some sort of hints of it.
Agreed. Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Sorry I spoiled it for you, but I'm not going to spoil the next one. Chris, the second most interesting book of the week. What did you pick?
All right. I've been waiting. I should have waited and found. I like to go back and find the dates when I talk about certain books. I have this book on a couple of lists over the last couple of years on my channel. And I've been going hard on this run in my own personal collecting. Quentin called this book out, Jeff, when you were asking what popped out to him. And my second pick was Thor 134, First appearance of the High Evolutionary. I've been looking at this book, like I said, for a couple of years. I think after we saw the first Guardian film, especially after the second, you guys know why. High Evolutionary. It would make so much sense. The MCU is going more cosmic. We got Warlock. We had the Cocoon, the Atom Cocoon. There's just so much there. And finally, this book is getting some love. So let's look at the numbers. 78% increase in sales. And again, that's online sales. CGC 9.4. So over $2,795 with a high raw of 770. And that book was a clean look. A book. Keep in mind, this is a Silver Age book. That book was clean. Now, I just looking at it was an eBay sale. I'm not even going to give you a great number, but it was a beautiful looking Silver Age book that sold for $770. So look, there's a lot of ways that the High Evolutionary could come in. A lot of people are thinking that with the next Guardians, the Volume 3, they could bring him in. We know that if you don't know, High Evolutionary had a role in creating Warlock, creating him and turning him into Warlock. So we could see that happen. They can kind of jump to that and make that happen in one film, which I think would absolutely work. I don't see the High Evolutionary as being a one-off, but I also don't see him as being the next Thanos as well. So he is a villain that they can introduce and to a certain capacity and then kind of bring him in and out. But remember the comics, guys, there's the High Evolutionary War. And I think that would be a nice build-up at some point, even if it's like in the middle of a trilogy or a franchise, like how they did Civil War within Captain America. But I think that High Evolutionary is definitely a character, a villain type character that in his own, because villains get a bad rap. Don't invest in villains and all this. And there's some, we could go down that conversation for another time. But I always talk about Silver Age or Bronze Age or some of these more classic books that you really got to look at, that no matter what happens with the MCU, these are books that are going to continue to increase in value over time. And I'm going to say it like this again. The farther we get away from these books and the older that these books get, the more they're going to be sought after. Even the comments continue to slightly increase, whether that's a little bit of inflation, whether it's a little bit of more collectors coming into the hobby and holding on to them, supply and demand. But when you have any key element in a day and age of this hobby where consumers and collectors are savvy because we have apps and databases and everything at our fingertips, we're looking to the next best things. We're caring about origins now. We're caring so much about first covers or, first team ups and all these things. These things that are happening, first appearances and all these key elements in Silver Age books are going to continue to increase. So for me, his introductory into the MCU is going to be the icing on the cake. And I will say that this is probably one that, and this is the last thing I'm going to say, and I'll let you guys jump in. I do think it's a decent time to still buy, because the only reason this book jumped this week is because of speculation, which we all like to do. The only way that I think this book can be a bad investment is if you wait, right? And we get a trailer, and then the book booms, and then the villain comes and he's a one-off. If the villain comes and he's a one-off, then we could definitely see people losing interest, maybe selling the book, flooding the market, and then if it's not something that you want to hold and you sell, you might take a loss. I don't know, but I'm staying hopeful that this villain is going to be represented good in the MCU, and that this is a decent key Silver Age book that's going to have long-term investment value.
I mean, even with Thanos though, that dropped off. Okay, so villains are a tough one. It's like Miles, Wolverine. Those books, for example, are solid. Those are strong books that are not going to drop off. But the Thanos book, Iron Man 55, also has Drax in it too. So it's a tough one. Quentin, though, your thoughts first.
I just have one word: Galactus. I think it's just going to be like connecting everything kind of together to bring in for me, that's just my opinion, the big bad. Like with the whole like Warlock, and someone mentioned Rocket and everything that's kind of happening. Like there's just too many dots that can be connected with this character. And I think it's just going to be he's going to be used as a tool, right? To bring forth other things.
Yep.
But it's a great book. It's a great book.
Yeah, this has been on my list for a while, and I just have not pulled the trigger. And I don't know why. Like there's one that was sitting, in the comic, before I moved. There's I would go every weekend digging through the dollar bins, but they had nice wall books behind a glass, and I'm just like, it was a fine, and like, I don't know, I couldn't do it. But he's got so many connections in the MCU.
Right.
Rocket is I like Heroes Reborn. He might have something to do with Rocket, but he also created Spider-Woman too.
Right.
So, and the way I was introduced to him, Chris, you mentioned this was the Evolutionary War, the annuals. There was a big annual series. So there's so much they can do with him. There's rumors that Mark Hamill is gonna, is gonna play him in the film. So who knows? But this is one you should, if you have an opportunity to get it. It's definitely classic.
Do you remember the price tag on that one you were looking at?
I was looking at some that were like 100 and change.
Yeah, $140 for a fine.
But I've been following a few for a while, but when this announcement came out, and if you look on eBay, it's like 20 sold on like that day. It was crazy.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So, I purchased my copy of this some years back. I think I paid only like $30 for.
Yeah, that's no great.
I think it might be about a VG plus, but still, man, I'm all about the mid grades if I can get them at a good.
Definitely. All right, moving on though. What is your third pick from this list? What book did you pick? What do you got?
All right, guys. I had a couple options, man. I could have gone with some Spider-Man, some more Spider-Man, but I had to go with this book again because I really wanted to break this down. Special Marvel Edition number 15. This was my number one pick last week. It's going to be my number one pick this week. And the reason why is because of the statements that I made last week and how I discussed this book. And just to give a refresher, first appearance of Shang-Chi, for those that don't know, the film dropped. It was great reviews, great Rotten Tomato score. It's been doing amazing things at the box office, even in the COVID era. Once the movie dropped, it made a record sale in a CGC 9.8 at $20,000. $20,050 to be exact. And I talked last week about how, look, this movie drops and we're getting record high prices, where usually you get the trailer, you get the hype before the movie, then the film drops and it might kind of stagnate or cool off a bit, where this one kind of did the opposite. But I even said last week, I said, well, it's the first week, we'll see. But I also said, I did talk about how I do feel like, the movie will come out of the theaters, go to VOD and whatnot, and we could see some ebb and flow, some cooling off. But I think that this book is here to stay. This movie is solidifying this character to a much broader audience, to a global audience, a bigger cultural audience. And I do think that this book is now, without a doubt, another Bronze Age blue chip key, right there in the same breath as Tomb of Dracula 10, Werewolf by Night 32, ASM 129, Hulk 181. And I'm not talking about, they don't all have equal value, but they're in that category of Bronze Age blue chip keys. So I was stating all those things, and it hits the top 10 again this week, but it has a dip in sales in a CGC 9.8. So that 9.8 sold this week for $13,800 after that record-breaking $20,000 last week.
Wow, that's a big drop.
Big drop, right? In terms
that's crazy.
Of just looking at numbers and percentage. But let's talk about what that means in terms of perspective, folks. Okay, because this is what's going to happen. And I'm not if any YouTubers are watching and you guys have done this already, I'm not mad at you. But I guarantee you there's probably some YouTubers out there that may have already done it or are going to do it, and they're going to be like, what's going on? Like, special edition 15, plummets or crashes, or what's going on with the market? It's not the case, folks, okay? We can't get this twisted. Look at this. I'm going to break some stuff down for you guys. Perspective. In early 2021, before the first trailer of the film, now we'd been knowing that this film was in development and it was happening and that they were filming. But before the first trailer, the fair market value for a CGC 9.8 was roughly $6,700. Get this. The first trailer released in April. From post-trailer to pre-release, which would be April to August, because it was released the first week of September. So from April to August, the fair market value was about $14,443 with a record high of $15,700 that was set in June. So again, what does that look like? It means that there were sales in between that record high. So there were sales before the 15.7 and after the 15.7 that were around $1,300, $1,400. And it hovered around that same price for those, 5 months or so, right? Now, check this out. The current sale on this 9.8 for 13.8 is only a 4.5% drop from the current fair market value from the last 5 months. So basically, the most recent sale sits right in line with the fair market value over the last 5 months, folks, since we saw the trailer. All right, so do you see how that's putting it into perspective? Now, here's another thing you have to understand. This is an early Bronze Age book. And it's a black cover. There's not a lot of 9.8s out there on the census. There's even less 9.8s out there for sale. So what does that mean? It means that one sale can skew fair market value like that. And get this. When the movie was released, you might have only had that one 9.8 CGC on the market, or this was a heritage auction, actually. There might not have been any on eBay at the time. There might not have been any anywhere else. And it was one person that said, I'm willing to pay 20 G's. One person that's probably sitting on a crap load of money and I'm paying 20 G's. So let's look at some of the other grades of this book for a little more perspective, guys. The buy it nows of this book in every grade have stayed steady. All right. You had one recent 9.6 sale drop from about an 11% since post trailer. So since we saw the trailer, you had a recent 9.6 drop about 11% from that 5-month fair market value. That's not that much still too similar. And there's a similar trend with every grade, where this book was sitting at a very low fair market value compared to pre-trailer in the beginning of the year. It almost doubled in fair market value overnight when the trailer dropped. That fair market value kind of sat for 5 months, kind of with a little bit of a bell-shaped curve. And now that the movie's been out for a couple of weeks, we see a little anywhere from like a 4% to an 11% drop. Here's the thing, though. This week saw a record high raw sale of $2,325. The previous high raw sold in August for $1,900. That is a 22% increase, folks. Fair market value is a rolling number that is just an average of what's out there. If you are looking at a fair market value of this book in X grade, whether it's this key book in a 9.6 or a 9.8, and over the last few months, there's been like 1,000 sold. When you compute fair market value, it's an average. You're taking all the sales, adding up the amount and dividing them by how many issues were sold. and that's your rough fair market value. Fair market value will never be an exact science, and it's always moving. When you have a book that's literally selling, especially this in a 9.8, maybe 1 or 2 a month, to sit here and look at a record high that was extremely high, that was like, over 25% increase from the standard fair market value over the last 5 months. And then you have like a 35% decrease of one sale a month later. Again, I just want everybody to understand this is perspective. This book isn't crashing. The market's not crashing. Oh, look, the movie came out and it's bombing now. Because I even talked about this last week. I gave a hypothetical, decrease in sale to where if you actually look at all the numbers, when you're looking at percentages and when you're looking at the amount of books out there, not that much is moving. I still believe that this book is here to stay. It's never gonna. I place a bet right now that this book in every CGC grade, from a 1.0 to a 9.8, is never gonna hit that floor of what it was before the trailer drop. And I'm gonna say it one more time before I wrap up. What was that 9.8 fair market value in the beginning of 2021? 66,700. So right now, basically that fair market value tripled off of one sale, right? It doubled and hovered, tripled off of one sale, and is right back down to around a double of that. I guarantee you will never ever see a book in any grade sitting at the fair market values that they were pre-trailer. And look, a high grade broke a raw sale broke records still. So
he's here to stay. Like, honestly, and it's a very good point you're bringing up that the fair market value is not an exact science. You have somebody going 20K for it, and that's just one person. Who knows how many 9.8s are out there, because it's very hard. Black cover. I really, you're on point in everything you said. I do want to hear Quentin's, thoughts on this as well, though.
Sure. I think prior to everything that transpired, I think that when the book increased in price, I think people were just like, oh, the book is actually valued at this. It was like, I know, Chris, the word undervalued. Yeah, it's like, it's a weird thing, but I don't think it was sitting at the proper price. It should have been.
Yeah.
And people are realizing, oh, there's all this thing that's happening here. That's where this book should be sitting, with all these things happening. And I think people are also realizing that something is being set, and this book is involved in that. It's not just a one-shot kind of movie. It's going to be involved in a lot of things. And I think that's what's going to give it that stability.
Definitely. I wouldn't be surprised if he made an appearance in the Eternals briefly.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, you and I both think, Quentin, that signal that came from the rings, I guess that Wong was referring to, I think it was Wong who said that, that could be from the Eternals, like that,
right.
Or Celestial or what have you. So
something. Yeah.
And again, this movie hasn't even opened in China yet, too.
Yeah.
That's another big thing. Once that happens, again, he's here to stay.
For sure. Yeah.
I thought it was a great
I like, Quentin, you bringing up the fact of, and I rarely use, I don't like to use the term undervalued a lot. Because I think there's a lack of understanding of what undervalue means in terms of finance. And it's basically when an intrinsic value is not realized on the market. And it's arguable it's arguable with comics what defines intrinsic value, because I think there's a fine line when there's movie hype. I think there's a fine line in calling movie hype intrinsic. That's more of an extrinsic value that people are looking at for investment purposes. But it's such a fine line because, like you said, even though this is movie hype, I think what it's doing is it's allowing people to come back to the comics and recognize the intrinsic value that was there all along. especially with this book and this character because of its cultural significance.
Right.
And I think that's something that's very, very big with this book, and why this book is going to stay around, and why I will stand firm and consider it a solid Bronze Age blue chip key. So I just wanted to speak to that. You pointed that out. Absolutely.
Ron, I just one more thing. I think they did, like I've only seen bits and pieces of the movie. I haven't seen it in its entirety, but I know they paid really good homage to the key elements of the book in terms of like heritage and so on and so forth.
Right.
But everything that happened after the movie, like the little Easter eggs, it's there for a reason. And that's what, like, I mean, we know that all these books are connected to movies now and TV. It's going to happen. It's happening. And I think that was there for a reason. And that gave it a different kind of value. Once that happened, it gave that book a completely different value because it's going to move it forward.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, he's been in a part of the Avengers for quite a few years now. So that they're heading in that direction. Kevin Feige also runs the comic book division of Marvel.
Right.
So there's a lot of things that they push out there for a reason.
It's done with a purpose. Yes.
You know, keep an eye on those things. Definitely keep an eye on those things. So, but right there, that ends the top 10 hottest comics of the week based off of Cover Price's data. We'll have a new and interesting list next week. Guys, definitely Kate. It's going to be a Kate Bishop week. I'll tell you that. But I also Carcom with Why the Last Man next week. So we'll see. We shall see. But again, that ends top 10 hottest comics of the week.